You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. In this episode, myself and Jasper Miners from evalu18.com explore a whistle-stop tour of the beginnings of the Strategic School of Golf Architecture. Along the way, we will look at a small group of friends and acquaintances that influenced and drove a movement which ultimately saw a game spread around the world. Jasper also shares some stories from the field as he provides historical consultancy services to clubs that have a requirement of that nature. Finally, we lose ourselves in planning the most epic golf trip you could ever hope to enjoy through France, England and Scotland, and a bucket list diver on the Emerald Isle. It was great to catch up with Jasper and tap into his inquisitive mind. We hope you enjoy the show. Hi Jasper, I hope spring is springing wherever you are in the greater London area.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a bit horrid yesterday. It was chucking it down with rain non-stop morning till evening. And today, mid-teens, bright, sunny. I think this is spring. It's sprung and hopefully it's here to stay.
Brilliant. Well, look, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf podcast. I'm very grateful for your time and looking forward to an interesting wander through a bit of history, bit of golf course architecture and whatever else takes our fancy. Just wondering, have you played any golf of note recently, Mr. Miners?
So recently I've been to Hankley Common, which was quite nice. So that obviously is a bit of James Braid and Harry Colt, three Colt holes called Colt's Corner. Been to Stoneham, so the recent work that they've done that way, which is essentially a Willie Park Junior routing. And following that down to Broadstone, which I was very happy to say was well worth going to. It's worth the trek down to Poole. So the South Coast, that was a bit of a revelation how good the golf was there. Some of the golf very reminiscent of St. George's Hill. The first couple of holes and then the last holes are the difference between making it between good and great, I guess you could say. But I think they've got that in hand, so we'll just have to see how that goes.
That's a downland course, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so Heathland downland Heathland. So Broadstone, it's definitely got a bit of both, really. It kind of meanders. You start out on the flatlands and then work your way up after 3 and 4, kind of into Heathland country. 9, you come out on a plateau, probably similar to the downland feel, and then back into more Heathland feel. And then 16, you kind of come out by the clubhouse, and you're back to a little bit of parkland. So it's a meandering routing with a variety of, like you say, downland, forest, heathland. But the work there is great and looks like it's only going to get better. So those were the recent 3 courses I've been to.
Oh, look, we'll get to your bucket list courses in time. Maybe as a jumping off point for the pod and to provide our listeners an introduction to those that don't know who you are, perhaps you might give us an introduction to Jasper Miners, your wanderings in the world of golf and how you got to where you are with the Evalu18 project.
Sure. So born and bred in Canada, a place called Saskatchewan, which is basically flat country. You're either a farmer or a rancher. Probably in the last 2 or 3 decades, you may have started to work in oil and gas, but that was basically everybody's bread and butter growing up. The golf isn't terrible. I would say the understanding of golf course architecture is probably foreign to most there. Certainly was to me, to the point that as an aspiring young amateur golfer, my family made it possible for me to go play what was considered to be the best golf courses in Western Canada. And I ended up working for essentially picking range balls on some of the big resorts in Western Canada so that I could have access to play and hone my game. And that's kind of where my life took a bit of a detour. I was playing the best golf courses, well, what I was told were the best golf courses. And I got so bored with flat fairways, white sand bunkers, and tilted greens facing the player that I ended up basically walking away from the game of golf. Fast forward probably about 10 years. Found myself in London. A mate of mine from Canada came to visit, and he thought we should go to the driving range for old time's sake. I did. At that time, I hadn't played or even touched a club for years, and effectively walked away with a set of Mizuno irons. I was bit by the bug again at the driving range. Not long after that, my wife, she hired a cottage in Wales near the Mumbles. And I Googled golf courses near the Mumbles and came up with Pinard. So I took my new set of clubs, played Pinard once, and I realized that this was the type of golf that I've been looking for. And from there, it's just been literally one roller coaster. Well, a hell of a roller coaster ride. Pinard was followed by St. Enodoc and then Perranporth. And after that, there's no stopping it. I was absolutely enthralled with what I was finding and playing. And I thought, if this is what golf could be, then I wanted to get back to it.
It's funny how serendipity tends to intervene occasionally, and were it not for that mate that came across from Canada, we might not be talking today.
No, I don't think we would. It was interesting. There was that, and then after I played those 3 courses, I just did an internet search, and I came up with Sean Arbel and his reviews of those same courses on Golf Club Atlas. And reference was made to a gentleman by the name of Tom Doak, who wrote a book, The Confidential Guide.
Never heard of him. No. He hides under a rock, this Tom Doak fellow you speak of.
So basically, that was my first book that I bought, was Tom Doak's Confidential Guide, after reading Sean Arbel's tours on Golf Club Atlas. And that was the slippery slope, really. After that, anything that was basically a Doak 4 and above was on my list to play. And I guess most people have the bucket list, but basically my list starts with Tom Doak 4s and above, wherever it might be. And that was the genesis, really, that started Evaluate 18 and this crazy adventure that has become it.
How many courses do you think you've played thus far in the UK and Ireland?
Well, I wish I played more in Ireland. I've been over a couple of times and haven't played as much as I like.
You're always welcome, obviously. Don't be a stranger, okay?
Well, I'm hoping June we're heading back over, so we'll hopefully be able to get the map out and circle a few. I'm sure we'll get to that. But I reckon in and around the UK, upwards of 200. Again, and that's from the good to the great, and some in between. Like you say, probably one of my favorite courses is Minchinhampton Old. It's, I think, less than £10 to play. I bang on about it quite a bit. But I'm quite interested in common land golf, and a bit of the rugged, small, sub 6,000 yard, 9-hole, 12-hole, whatever it might be, just something that's weird and wonderful, a bit quirky. Those are the types of courses that I like to find as well. So yeah, they're not just I'm not a logo man where, I've got logos all over my bag and head covers and shirt and trousers and shoes and ball markers. I think good golf can be found just about anywhere, but it's the architecture behind it, the design, the strategy. That's what makes golf good. And
the land, obviously, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah. In line with the title of your podcast, Firm and Fast, it's amazing what good land can do. Just the right conditions for golf to flourish. That makes a massive difference. But the good thing is it's found in spades, no matter where you go. You just have to know where to look.
Indeed. Well, look, let's maybe jump off with maybe a look at the strategic school of golf. Towards the end of the 19th century, the popularity of the game of golf extended well beyond the Scottish borders. With a dearth of linksland within reach of cities such as Sheffield, Birmingham and London, golfing establishments started to explore inland sites. Much of what passed for Victorian golf architecture at the time was based on equity and fairness. In other words, doling out punishment equal to the extent of the sin involved in the particular shot. Alpinisation and penal cross hazards were often in evidence, likely in an attempt to recreate the natural ground hazards in existence on the first links courses. Some listeners may not be aware of the names of John Lowe and Stuart Patton and what they did at Woking's Fort and indeed other holes on the golf course. It's interesting that neither of these gentlemen were actually designers per se. However, the revisions over a number of years at Woking sent reverberations around the golfing world. You might expand on how important Lowe and Patton's endeavours at Woking were to the future direction of the game of golf on inland sites.
Yeah, so this was an interesting. I mean, Woking is one of those places that it feels like golf. As soon as you arrive, you know you're somewhere special. I found some information that would lead one to believe that Lowe and Patton were taken by Cuthbert Bouchart's greens just down the road at West Hill. And I also did some work at Bleakdown or West Byfleet, as it's known now. Whatever might have been, the greens that they gently massaged and helped evolve over decades, and essentially placing hazards on that fourth hole, kind of started a revolution. John Lowe, I think it was 1903, wrote concerning golf. It was a bit of a revolutionary book at the time because it essentially put pen to paper on a change, a paradigm shift from, as you mentioned, penal golf architecture to strategic. And it wasn't necessarily that the execution of those hazards necessarily changed in form or structure, but placement was the ideal. So on a straight hole, classic Victorian penal golf course architecture, you'd have bunkers lining left and right side of the fairway, and you probably have a cross hazard that was perpendicular to the line of play. So the idea of essentially punishing bad shots, so confining one to hitting straight shots, and then almost like a steeplechase, having to overcome these obstacles between point A and point B. That was the essence of golf. But the idea of placing hazards introduced the idea of risk and reward. But it also brought into play essentially formations. So, for example, a cross hazard in form and function perpendicular line of play is very penal, very Victorian in nature. But an echelon bunker, something diagonally set against the line of play or at 45 degrees to it, well, essentially in form and function, in form it could be identical, but in function it could be very different. So the idea of placing hazards in these ways is what really started the ball rolling. And obviously it was Tom Simpson that kind of came out of that Woking school. But if we're honest, a lot of those early golf course architects, Colt, Fowler, Simpson, and even Willie Park Jr. Were individuals that benefited from what had been done previously, whether that was Tom Dunn or old Tom Morris. They essentially stood on the shoulders of giants and were able to make the greens and put in hazards that made the best use of these amazing routines that many of them made.
Lowe and Patton arguably ungreased the pole for the likes of Colt, Mackenzie, Allison, Morrison, Fowler, Abercrombie, Simpson et al., furthering the growth of the game both in the UK and Ireland and Europe and further afield. As you said, following on from the initial standard bearers and giants that were Alan Robertson, Old Tom, George Morris's brother, J.H. Taylor, Johnny Ball, obviously the great champion, James Braid, etc. As a Canadian, you might tell us how some of these men and their philosophies influenced the likes of Stanley Thompson, C.B. Macdonald, Donald Ross, and even, pray tell, Robert Trent Jones.
Yeah, I must say that my understanding and my knowledge of Canadian golf course architecture is not as deep as it would be in the UK, unfortunately. Maybe that's when I eventually go back home. But of interest, both Stanley Thompson, C.B. Macdonald, Canadian by birth, but they obviously understood well the precepts of strategic golf. Part of Macdonald's understanding of golf course architecture came from studying the great golf courses of the UK, and basically applying what he learned in practice on the ground for him in America. So, you look at Stanley Thompson as well. Been able to play Banff Springs quite a few times as a junior golfer, as an amateur. And even though I didn't understand anything about golf course architecture at the time, when you played Banff Springs, you inherently could feel that it was great, that it was different. And the only explanation is that Stanley Thompson understood why. And he really understood what basically individuals were starting to figure out in the first decade of the 20th century, the early 1900s.
Am I correct in saying that old Tom Morris taught C.B. McDonald how to play golf?
Whew, that is a good question, and probably a little bit out of my realm of expertise. But I do think that there was. So, I mean, anyone that went to St Andrews, I think even then, old Tom Morris was kept in very high regard. If I remember, I've actually got the Evangelist, of course, of golf, George Batto's book on C.B. McDonald just behind me. But yeah, I do believe that he spent a bit of time in St Andrews, and no doubt most golfers would have wanted to pick the brains of old Tom Morris as they were there. And then, of course, I mean, Donald Ross, anyone that would have been from Scotland around that time would have had an intimate understanding of old Tom Morris, his ideals, his precepts, and what he was doing and why he was doing it. So it would have been a very small circle back then with regards to those who were in the know and were considered to be movers and shakers in the early industry that was golf at that time.
Yeah, it's funny how small that Oxford, Cambridge, Uxbridge set were, and I guess the influence ultimately that they went on to have in the golden age of golf course architecture.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is go look. Next time you're at any of these golf courses, the honors boards in the halls of these clubs, and you keep seeing the same names coming up over and over again, especially in the early part of the game. But it was a small close knit community, and I don't know if that was a reflection. Maybe this is a Keith Cutton type question with regards to his book, but. Could this be just a reflection of the fact that at the time, those individuals that went to those universities that had those professions also had the time and the disposable income to perhaps not have to worry about putting food, clothing, and shelter on the backs of, the children in a Victorian townhouse in the east of London. So, for whatever reason, there was a small amount of individuals, but perhaps that also is what laid the foundation for such a momentous movement forward with regards to our understanding of what makes golf good. Just being around individuals that would be able to have these types of conversations and bounce ideas off each other would have been phenomenal. I'm thinking about one example. The opening day at St. George's Hill. Just done a little bit of research about the individuals that were reported to be on hand then. And what's interesting that at Weybridge, when St. George's Hill opened, the individuals that were there were like the who's who of golf. So there was J.H. Taylor, James Braid, George Duncan, Alex Hurd, Tom Ball, Abe Mitchell, Horace Hutchinson, Allison would have been there, and Colt.
Wow.
So you think the conversation that
to be a fly on the wall for that particular get together.
And that's the thing. I mean, see, you imagine you get those individuals sat around the bar at Weybridge, having that conversation. What would have been accomplished in the thinking and the understanding of golf course architecture just in that single afternoon, October 2nd, 1913. How much was that worth? And then all of those individuals go away again. And then a couple of months later, they're at another course and that one's opening and there's another match to open it up. And they're all there again, talking about what they continue in the conversation. And so perhaps it is that small crowd and that intimate association and understanding that they had with each other that really spurned and forwarded this monumental monumental progression in our understanding of how golf should be designed and what we should actually be seeing on the ground.
It strikes me as interesting anytime I sort of dip into some literature, and it appears that the society, which would be the Golfing Society of Oxford and Cambridge, generally all these gentlemen were members of said society also.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, you look through, obviously John Lowe, Herbert Fowler, Harry Colt. I believe Alistair Mackenzie was given his introduction or his membership or introduction to the R&A through Harry as well. So you have this subset of great golfing minds that are, on all intent for all intents and purposes, working with each other to forward the game of golf by pursuing their each individual careers. And whether that was because of their profession as lawyers or doctors, that they had these common ties that kind of ran through various levels and spheres within their lives. And it's just fascinating to see what that group in the early 1900s, before the end of the 1890s up till basically just before World War I. It was amazing what golf was like then. I guess only in hindsight we truly understand how incredible those couple of decades actually were, and what effect those individuals in that time had on us even till today.
In conjunction with your Evaluating website project, I know you're also working on the Harry Colt project. You might tell us what inspired you to delve deeper on Harry Shopland Colt, what you've been able to find as part of your searching and research.
Yeah, so Harry Colt is one of those individuals that I hadn't really heard of growing up, because there's a bit of Harry Colt in Canada, in Toronto, and I guess Allison in Hamilton, I think. So there's some evidence that he was in Montreal as well, but it's thin on the ground. So there's not a lot of Colt content in Canada. You've obviously got the connection to Pine Valley, so everybody knows about Crump and Colt. But really beyond that, Old Elm, I guess, there's not a whole lot of Colt. And then you come over to the UK, and you've got Harry Colt everywhere. And I thought what was interesting was, for whatever reason, the general population in England especially loves James Braid. They know who he is, they know who he was, and anyone that has a James Braid golf course likes to shout from the rooftops about it. What I find is that there's a reluctance for whatever reason to do the same with Harry Colt. And I don't think there's anyone that would argue that the portfolio of Harry Colt against James Braid, it's not a difficult conversation to say that Colt was better. I think their best was both equally as good, but both being prolific architects, Harry Colt's just standard, the quality that he was able to reach with regards to his work is unbelievable. And I had never been to a Harry Colt golf course that I didn't think was great. I mean, it's so true. A good routing can make a massive difference. And oftentimes I would play a golf course and then start doing a bit of research on it, and it would be a Colt course. And there's loads of courses in and around London and in the UK that you play, and then you think, well, that was interesting. Like, that was actually really good. I had never heard of this course before. And then you find out it was a Colt course. So I think that was kind of the beginning of it. And then after I started the Harry Colt project, I found out that Adam Lawrence was writing his biography. So a quick phone call and a quick email later, I assured Adam that I wasn't trying to steal his thunder, because he's done a tremendous amount of work. But it's been really good. Adam's a gentleman, and we've been able to do some work together. If I come up with stuff that I don't think he's found, I'll share it with him to contribute towards what he's doing. And it's been nice to be able to learn a little bit more. So I think it's just the reverence for Harry Colt and the fact that we don't know a lot about him. There's been a couple of biographies, but no one's actually been able to really nail down exactly what Harry Colt's been responsible for. but Adam's well on his way, and been able to perhaps help in a very small way towards that, and even just raise the awareness of Harry Colt. It's great for those clubs, and it's good for his legacy. And I think we'll probably be hearing a lot more about him after Adam's done with his book.
Yep, I'm pleased to announce that Adam has agreed to come on at some point to speak about Harry Colt in greater detail. So I'm minded just to mention that he did not seem to be the most photogenic of people, in that there's not many pictures of him for some strange reason. But also, he seemed to be quite a self-deprecating sort of individual. You mentioned Swinley Forest there at the beginning. I know he referred to that as his least worst course. Seems to be not the type of character that Dr. Mackenzie was. He seemed to be quite a self-publicist, and would tell anybody that that would care to listen that he was possibly the greatest architect known to man. But you might speak about Harry Colt's importance in terms of the start of, I guess, formalized golf course architecture.
Yeah, so recently I think Adam wrote that he's found some writings from Colt from the 1890s, which would put it pretty much as the first bit that we've actually got. So we know that he was involved at Rye, and perhaps even there were other projects in and around that time as well that Adam's come up with. But essentially, he did a lot of work. I think the common thread between a lot of these early strategic golf course architects, if you want to call it that way, Harry Colt, Abercrombie, J.F. Abercrombie, they were essentially working with Willie Park Jr. So they were taking his routings, and then doing things like bunker placement and greens. So what had essentially been established was the skeleton or the bones of a lot of these golf courses. And then this idea of taking the rugged nature, as opposed to almost as a juxtaposition against the Victorian way of introducing hazards to a golf course, and almost trying to incorporate a natural looking hazard, which was, for all intents and purposes, just as artificial as any Victorian or penal hazard, just done in a manner that had a bit of art as opposed to just simply a utilitarian purpose. And then I think in time we started to understand, we started to see through the first decade of the 1900s into just prior to World War II. It almost seemed like by 1909 through till 1914, a lot of the work that these guys were doing is almost like peak strategic golf course architecture, especially when it comes to Harry Colt.
I guess we got to remember also at the time that the construction process that we would consider now wasn't in existence. I mean, the steam shovel per se, in terms of was post World War One. So a lot of this construction is literally lie of the land, using the existing contours, and maybe really only pushing up greens and tees. Would that be fair?
I think that's very fair. I mean, I was the first time I played, so some of these courses that haven't been altered. When you get to go and walk around Wentworth East, when you look at Swinley Forest is a good example. Even some of the work at thinking the Moore Park, Harry Colt, the high course. So there's the east west, and then the high, and the high course. Okay, there's not a lot of Harry Colt left. It's been lengthened tremendously compared to what it would have been originally. But around those green complexes, because of what they were working with, was essentially horses, plows, and as many local people that they could drag out of the pub. But that was basically the workforce. There's records of upwards of 600 people building some courses in London. Just a tremendous amount of manpower. But I think in that, what you didn't lose was a lot of those natural green or natural contours that would be found in the land, because they weren't dealing with instruments or implements big enough to take them out. And as rudimentary as some of that construction was, literally pushing up tees and greens, even drainage. You walk around again Wentworth East, and even Swinley Forest. You can see, how they dealt with things, drainage ditches that they put in, and then they would use those because they had to. So it's almost because they didn't have all that technology. They had to be really clever about what they did, and it's almost the simplicity and the rudimentary nature of it that makes it so good. And I think that's, for me, what really stands out about the early work of these individuals is that they were able to accomplish such good golf using very basic implements, wheelbarrows, shovels in a lot of cases, and just being ingenious. They were able to create golf courses which have stood this, like, the test of time. Are still considered to be some of the greatest golf courses in the world.
I'm getting a flashback to a description of the construction process at Casa de Campo, it's the Teeth of the Dog in the Dominican Republic, and that would have been 1960, Pete Dye. But I heard a story about the essentially filling in a coral reef, literally with people, wheelbarrows, and dirt. And that took a year and a half, I think. So big was the job. They actually, I guess needs must, I suppose the Dominican Republic perhaps wasn't quite as flush with dozers and whatever else in the 60s. So you made do with what you had, and the raw material with people. So get on with it. And they actually seeded the fairway above where they were filling in, and basically just transplanted the grass down a year and a half later when they were finished with the filling in process. Anyway, a complete aside and not era specific at all.
No, but it proves the point, doesn't it? I mean, there's so many more factors that we have to be worried about today when it comes to golf course construction and maintenance. Just the environmental side of things. I mean, that would just never happen. Not in the West, anyways, or in most areas in the world. But you're right. They just had to be ingenious, and if they had something that was really good, then they would just leverage it. They would get everything they could out of it. So as another little example, Prestbury, Harry Colt course. You got this awkward piece of land. It's a parcel with lots of jagged edges. There's like triangle spurs that come off of it. There's basically one thoroughfare of kind of a long depth of the property. Clubhouse at one end, and then basically you can run two holes concurrently back to back and maybe get a decent sized par 4 and maybe a par 5 out of it, which Colt did 3 times. What's interesting is that in the middle of the middle of the property, there's a stretch of land that's on the side of a hill, and if you look at that piece of property, it's amazing what he was able to get out of it. So again, just bringing up this picture so I can see it, in this little band of property running through the center of it, he almost uses it as a pivot as he routes the golf course. And in that little stretch of land of just a couple of acres, he's got the 5th green. Beside it is the 6th tee. Then he's got the 1st green. Behind that, he's got the 2nd tee. Beside that, he's got the 13th green. Then he's got the 17th green. And then interworked with all of those things, he's got the 14th and 18th tees. So if you were to draw it up and say, this is what we're going to do with this, like, I don't know how many acres it is, probably less than 10 acres. We're going to have all these green sites, all these tee boxes, and we're going to play in it from all these different directions. There's no way that it should work. But it does, and it works really well. And I think for me, that is part of what makes golf course architecture really, really cool. So how do you take that piece of land? How do you find 18 holes? And how do you make them all work? And Prestbury is just an absolutely amazing example of what can be done on a small footprint if you're willing to break the so-called rules, which of interest Harry Colt did. And we've actually just found some evidence that links Alistair Mackenzie directly to the course. So it's not just a Colt course anymore, it's a Mackenzie and Colt course. So that's one of our recent discoveries, actually, that we've been able to share with the club. is that Pressbury is a Colt and Mackenzie, not just a Colt. So one of those things, an amazing little project, amazing little site, and it's a great golf course to play. But when you can also view it from or through the lens of golf course architecture, there's so much more to get out of that one golf course and one round of golf. Incredible to me. Perhaps boring to others, but I find it absolutely fascinating.
Now, what you, I guess, express and explain there sounds very intimate, as opposed to, I guess, you mentioned the rules of golf course architecture, or so-called rules of golf course architecture, and our modern interpretation that holes should be separated from each other, that golfers should be separated from each other, that long views perhaps as a result of the separation are somewhat less in demand or less available as a result of that separation.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I mean, there is, I mean, again, Swinley Forest is another example. I keep coming back to it just because we're on Colt. But the views that you get across those courses, so like after 5, looking up the hill, then when you get to 9. So basically from everywhere you are on the course, you feel like you're on your own. You're in this intimate little, just you and your group. But you can also see various holes or bits of holes all over the course at any one time. There's really no point on the course where you can't see what's going on around you, but you still feel as though you have a little bit of peace and solitude. But then you get other courses. Again, going back to another design that Colt touched, Royal Worthington, Mildenhall. Absolutely brilliant little golf course, 9-hole golf course. The holes cross each other. There's shared fairways. For all intents and purposes, it shouldn't work, and it does it brilliantly. But again, there's just the ability to understand why they work and how they work, and that even if something breaks the mold or breaks the rules, that it doesn't mean that it's not good. And I think the ability to evaluate golf on its merits individually, whether it's good or not, is a way to get a lot more enjoyment out of your golf and to enjoy golf on a different level, rather than just pencil and card, keeping track, stroke play, as we go around 18-hole courses with fountain on 18, 7,200 yards and par 72s.
What you're speaking about there is suspend what you think you know. Variety is to be celebrated, and if it brings you back and it's fun, well, it's cool.
Absolutely, yeah. And that, I mean, I think golf would be so much better if that was the criteria for it. Is it fun? Like when I finish 18, I don't want to go in. I just want to go back to the first tee and start again. And I think if we aim for that, as opposed to what the scorecard says, or making it tough for some amateurs, top level amateurs or professional golfers that play it 1 or 2 days a year, or maybe even 4 days a year. And we just worry about making golf fun for the other 361 golfers and the rest of the 99% of the population. I mean, what an amazing thing that would be if we could actually create fun golf. And then this whole thing about growing the game, well, to be quite honest, I think if we had golf like that golf would, in a lot of ways, grow itself. Because people would just come back. It's quick, it's cheap, it's enjoyable, it's fun. And we wouldn't have to, there wouldn't be a lot of discussion about how we get more people into the game and how do we keep them coming back.
We've established that the Colts and the Morrisons and the other gentlemen had the opportunity to and the time to invest thought and effort, but also the means that that afforded them that opportunity and the interest. You mentioned Tom Simpson in the introductory piece with regard to Woking, and I know that courses designed by Mr. Simpson are particular favourites of yours. We have a dearth of Simpson courses here in Ireland. However, County Louth, Carlow and Ballybunion are 3 such courses that I'm pretty familiar with. What do you think characterises Tom Simpson's approach to golf course design?
Yeah, so Tom Simpson for me he's the doyen. Like at least his architectural theory, his ethos, and essentially how he practiced, how he put it into the ground. For me, that is the ultimate. if you ever had a chance to work on a golf course and then design a golf course, I would want to use his design theory and ethos. So why? And basically, it's something I've come up with. Again, I don't know if someone else has used this term, but strategic minimalism is what I like to refer to it as. So the essence is just simplicity. And I think at the time, if you look at a lot of the writings, especially of Mackenzie and Simpson, they referred to economy. And I think what they were saying was, yeah, we don't want a proliferation of design elements that are going to cost a lot to build and maintain. But as well, in order to use less and use it more effectively, it just has to be designed better. And I think that's one thing that separates Colt from Mackenzie, or Colt from Simpson for me, is that when you look at Colt's plans or his renderings, he'll oftentimes draw the tiger route to the hole from tee to green, and then the rabbit route. And he will have placed bunkers at various points for each of those two categories of golfers, which is fine. And that's great. And it's just the way that Colt went about it. What's interesting to me is that Simpson did exactly the same thing, but he didn't use two sets of hazards in order to create intrigue or suspense or strategy for those two categories of golfer. He effectively used one set of hazards, and if he could, only one hazard. So, for example, like the fourth hole at Woking. So although it wasn't his creation and design, the essence of that one hazard in the middle of the fairway, that center line, kind of laid the foundation for what he would do moving forward. So the one modern hole, again, I've never been to play it, but I've spent an awful lot of time looking at it and thinking about it, is the second hole at Talking Stick, which is a Corey Crenshaw design in Arizona. And I know Tom Doak, again, is a massive fan of that hole. I think I read an article that had come out a while ago that it was the hole that he felt he wanted, or if he could put his name beside any hole that he hasn't designed, which one would it be? And I think it was that. But it's amazing. It's a par 5. The only features on the hole are the tee and the green. There's out of bounds in a straight line left side of the fairway, and there's one bunker complex on the front right-hand corner of the green. But that one bunker complex, 2 bunkers, influences your thought from the tee, your second shot in, and your third. So you've got this massive expanse of fairway. You can go anywhere you want on it. The second shot, you have to ask yourself, am I going to go for the green? Or am I going to lay up? And really through one hazard, now you get cerebral golf on your tee shot, your approach, and your third. So your layup and your approach. So for me, it's that typifies Tom Simpson. He wanted to get the absolute most out of a single design element to create suspense, intrigue, and risk and reward. And the ability to do that using just one hazard, I think, is the epitome of great golf architecture. The ability to do that is genius. So Tom Simpson would often say that you need to be as cerebral as you are talented. So you need to use your head as much as you need to use your hands. He wanted to decorate the landscape. He wanted to make it more beautiful. So similar to Alistair Mackenzie, but he wanted to do it with strict economy. It should have that feeling of being alive. So when you play like New Zealand, Cruden Bay, Hayling, Lip Hook, it feels different. It's got a different feel to it. And the cool thing about all of his designs is that although you're inland on heathland, you feel as though you could be in Scotland playing links. And it's that respect for the classics, classicism, that is interwoven in his design ethos. And there's no one, I don't think anyone, that does it better than Tom Simpson. And that's why I respect and just revere, because he was so good at what he did, and he did it to a standard that was was so elevated. Um, it's just, I have nothing but respect and admiration and revere for what he did, not only to espouse what he thought was good, but then also to be able to produce it. Phenomenal.
You're a fan then, so.
I guess you could say kind of went off on there. But I mean, it's. I mean, Tom Simpson for me is he's absolute. It's absolute genius. And I think the more Tom Simpson we could get back into golf, the better it would be. And not just from a playing point of view, also with regards to input and maintenance. So the other things we haven't seen a whole lot of, use of blindness. So I'm not saying that every hole has to be Klondike and Dell, but Tom Simpson would often use blindness when it came to pin positions on a green. He would try and hide some of it, or he would introduce some sort of basically mental or visual confusion. So things would look further away or closer than they actually were. He would do that by using echelon bunkers or size of bunkers, where he would put 3 in a row and then the first 2 would be smaller and the last one would be bigger. All sorts of really, really cool stuff. But it's those little things that really, really set him apart. So we haven't been able to find a direct tie to Tom Simpson in West Sussex. But I mean, the echelon bunkers on the 17th at West Sussex are phenomenal. The 3 holes, the 3 par 3s, I think it's 5, 6, and 8. Again, 3 different par 3s in the span of 4 holes that are completely different to one another, but are all equally brilliant. And I don't know any other golf course architect that was able to do what he did. The height of his work is just unbelievable. It's so good.
It's ironic, in fact. I've got 2 notes down here, and you bet me to that blindness point. I know there are probably listeners out there, and certainly some of my mates who aren't great fans of blindness, or indeed think that centerline bunkers are unfair. What or how could one make a case to them that actually variety is good, and having different challenges presented to the golfer is in fact to be welcomed, as opposed to a homogeneous scenario?
Yeah, so I mean, let's take a blind hole to start. So I'm just thinking, so obviously one of the most famous blind holes, par 3s, Dell, the hinge. So the right side of the green is visible. So if it's pinned on the right, you can see it. If it's basically pinned on the left, you can't. And they probably put like a white rock on the hill to give you some sort of wayfinding to get it there. But it's quite simple, really. If you can't see the pin, it's on the left-hand side of the green. You just have to hit it over. But I don't think there's any golfer that's ever played that hole and wasn't curious about where his shot ended up as he was walking that, whatever it is, 150 yards from the tee to the green. And that apprehension is, I think, what makes semi-blind or blind holes quite interesting. And then you go to a hole like Painswick in Gloucestershire, and it's literally I don't know, 30-40 meters or yards in the air, so up this blind hill to an old Iron Age fort to this massive punch bowl, and you literally cannot see any of the green, any of the flag. You just have to trust that if you hit it over the top of this hill, you'll get it on the green. So I can see why some people don't like a hole like that, because they like to see where the ball goes. But for me, I mean, of course, you'd never want to play a golf course with 18 blind holes. That wouldn't be great. But variety is kind of, it's the same old thing, it's spice of life. And I think what Tom Simpson did was that he wasn't necessarily a fan so much of making things completely blind, but he would oftentimes, the idea was that if you had an approach to the green, so let's say in the modern day verbiage, you have a wedge in your hand, you should be able to see the bottom of the flagstick. So, but if you're on the wrong side of the fairway, or you were playing a long shot in where you actually weren't aiming at the pin directly, then maybe it's okay to have half the pin obscured. by a bunker or some sort of false front or some sort of landform in front of the green. And I think what that does is it's not blindness for blindness sake, but what you're trying to do is essentially introduce a little bit of anxiety so that it's not so straightforward. I mean, and that's kind of why I play golf without a rangefinder now. Because I think those courses that do it really well, is you're not pulling out a laser and getting like a number to a pin that you can essentially just fly it to a certain distance and you just hit that club and hope for the best. But you've got to rely upon your senses. So you as a golfer need the skill to be able to look at something and try and figure out, what is the architect doing? Why does it look this way? Is it 140 yards or is it 160? And that for me is probably part of golf that we've lost just because of GPS and laser rangefinders, is the ability to understand golf, see golf, and then react to it. And that's something that perhaps we don't get a lot of from the modern game, because not that it isn't there with a lot of these old courses, just we have the technology now to surmount that. I
guess it's down to what Mr. 5 times Peter Thompson talks about simply as judgment and appreciation of how one judges a shot.
Absolutely. And I mean, maybe that's exactly when we come to talk about centerline bunkers. You know, you had Tyrrell Hatton, who I think it was Tyrrell that was moaning about the fact that he couldn't hit a par 5 and 2 and that he went into the centerline bunker.
Yeah, I was links there probably 6 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting that, well, okay, I mean, you can argue it. Alister McKenzie and Bobby Jones at Augusta National, they designed that course so that every single par 5 could be reached in 2 if the individual hit 2 perfect shots. So if you want to hold that up as the standard of what a three shot hole should be, then I guess maybe he's got a point. You know, you could argue that Bobby Jones and Alister McKenzie thought that maybe that was, you know, a good thing. But the death of a proper 3-shot hole, you know, what a joy it was. You know, you watch some of the old footage at the Open Championships where you got like Seve with a 2-iron going in full bore at like a par 5 into like the teeth of the wind, and you're like, yeah, where's that shot now? But anyways, going back to centerline bunkers, the thing in the modern game is that if you can hit it high, if you can hit it straight and you can hit it far, that's a good shot and it should be rewarded. And actually in 2022, we're going back to the 1892s. Because that was the idea back then, was that if you could hit it high, straight, and far, then you should be rewarded. And it would be fair if you were. So the whole idea of Victorian golf, well, when you came inland, you know, we should reward good shots. But you know as well as I do, when you play links golf, you can hit it long, high, and straight. And if it hits the wrong part of that fairway, it's a crapshoot. Like it can go anywhere. And so we got a little bit, when golf came inland and we started designing and building golf courses according to what we thought was right and fair, we got away from really the spirit of the game that was inherently linked to linksland golf. And that's where the guys like Alister McKenzie and Harry Colt and Tom Simpson were saying, let's get back to the spirit of the game. Let's go back to the way golf should be played. And that's on the links, but we're just doing it inland. And how can we bring that here? And that whole essence of, you know, do we need to reward a good shot? Well, I think we should reward a shot that's properly placed, as opposed to one that's just hit high, straight, and far. And that is the essence, really, of understanding golf course architecture and strategic design.
As our mutual friend Mike Clayton says, if the measure of a good shot is where it is relative to the next shot, then actually being in that cross bunker is you've not hit a good shot.
Exactly. And that's the point. So, you know, it's also Mike, you know, he said to me one time that we're in trouble of starting to understand too much. The art of the game is becoming the science of the game. So we've got into TrackMan and numbers and, you know, permutations and data crunching and everything. And the art of the game, like the way that Seve would have played it, or, you know, even Tiger would have played it, like that's almost dead and gone, which is a real shame. Because I think there's a, you know, we talk about not wanting to have 2 sets of rules for the pros and for the amateurs. And to be honest, like I know a lot of guys that will play a half set or a short set. They'll carry 6 to 10 clubs just so that they can try to manufacture shots. Well, their skill set, including mine, is nowhere near a PGA Tour player's or even an elite amateur golfer. But that bit of the game of trying to hit a fade when you need to take some distance off, or you try and hit a running draw when you don't have enough club, all of that type of golf, and you need the right golf course for it. But all that type of golf we've lost basically on the PGA and DP World Tour, except for that 1 month when they come over and play proper golf courses.
Well, you could make the argument that watering the fairways in Royal St George's last year for the Open Championship is a retrograde step because that was done under the F word.
It's one of those things where, you know, the distance debate basically disappears when you have baked out links golf. Because whether you hit a driver 300 yards and carry it 300 yards, or you hit your 3-iron and rolls out 300 yards, it's still going 300 yards. And that burn that crosses at 300 yards is still in play. So now you've got to think about not just where you're hitting your ball or how you're hitting it, but you also have to think about what it does when it hits the ground. And you know, how do you approach it? You know, the aerial game is the status quo. So that's the way golf is played. But the running game, and I think that's the other thing that really strategic golf, golden age, whatever you want to call it, especially inland golf in the UK, in and around London, that's what makes it so good, is it's still receptive on a lot of courses to the ground game. And if I can't carry it 250 in the air with the 3 hybrid, I've still got a shot to try and roll something in and up through a couple of bunkers. And for me, that's really exciting to play. So I guess for an average golfer, or perhaps a little bit better than average, maybe like a single digit, the golf that we can play in and around London on these like classic designs is probably very reminiscent of the type of golf that was actually played when golf course architecture was at its very peak. And that's an exciting thing that I really enjoy, the ability to try and almost see these golf courses through the eyes of using modern equipment, modern tees, modern ball, but still be able to play the courses similar to how they should have been played or designed to be played.
Okay, I get it. You're a lucky devil. You live in North London. You have all that Surrey Heathland stuff on your doorstep. Obviously, our mutual friend Mike Clayton always espouses the quality of golf that can be found to your immediate south among the leafy lanes of the Surrey Sandbelt and its environs. I'm assuming you've had much opportunity to explore the aforementioned leafy lanes.
Yeah, so it is true. We're spoiled, and I think that's one thing that England golf as a whole doesn't get the credit it deserves. So, and if we're just talking about links golf, yeah, okay, Scotland and Ireland, amazing. But then you've also got the English coastlines. So basically the Wirral, Liverpool, and up, and then you've got the Kent coastline. But London itself, London proper. So if you want to talk about Harry Colt, you've got Swinley Forest, you've got St. George's Hill, you've got Sunningdale New. And again, that's not 100% a Harry Colt. Simpson was involved on that, and Morrison was involved in that in the late 30s because they weren't necessarily enamored with what Colt did to start off with. But then you've also got Wentworth. And we could talk about the West. That's,
I'd rather not.
Okay. But the East is actually a really good golf course. And it's one that I really, really like. And quite fortunate to be able to have played that and a little bit of access to it every once in a while. So those are like good golf courses that I particularly enjoy. So that's kind of up the Colt Avenue. And then you've got this other fellow by the name of Herbert Fowler. So you've got the Berkshire and Walton Heath, 236-hole courses, the red and the blue, and then the old and the new. And for me, Walton Heath old, the back nine, it took me it's a little bit like the old course. You have to play it a couple of times or walk it a couple of times or just think and ruminate on it in order to get it. But once it finally clicks, it is so good. So Walton Heath Old is a particular favorite. And then just down the road from Walton Heath, again, if you don't have the money to play those courses or it's just not possible, Reigate Heath is a great little golf course, literally over the M25 from Walton Heath. Then you go into Abercrombie. So you've got Worplaston, you've got the Addington, and you've got Knoll Park. So the Addington we'll be hearing more about, CDP, what they're doing there. And Ryan knows the owner. It's already broken into the top 100, I think, UK and Ireland on one of the recent rankings. But that will go into the top 100 if it's done, and it will be done right. I think quite confident that it'll get very close, if not break it. So Addington is one that we'll be hearing a lot more about. And then you've got his work at Knoll Park, which is similar and maybe even a little bit more in excess than what the Addington is, just with regards to topography. It's a little bit more extreme, but it's cool to see. You got the 3 Ws. So you've got Woking, West Hill, New Zealand, Tom Simpson, Harry Colt. And it's not just the big names that we mentioned, the Swinleys, the St. George's Hill, the Sunningdales. You've got little courses like Cuddington, Denham, Rickmansworth. Rickmansworth, I think, is like less than £20 to play. It's just beside Moore Park. So it used to be the third course at Moore Park, and the east, and then it became Rickmansworth. But again, a little Harry Colt Muni that you can get on. You can literally rock up and you can play the course, and it's great. Conditioning is not brilliant. There's a couple of ropey holes now, but probably 15 of those 18 holes are good golf holes, and it's cheap in the middle of London. And then if you go down towards Dorset, well, you got Hinckley, Stoneham, Broadstone, as I mentioned previous. Hockley, again, it's a little downland course by Winchester. And then, of course, Liphook. I think Liphook and it is absolutely stunning. And one of my particular favorites, if not my favorite, is West Sussex, Pulborough. It is just superb. It's so good. It was a staple of the World Top 100, and it's only gotten better. And I don't know where it's gone because it's good.
I hope you're on commission from England Golf or something like that.
Be nice, unfortunately not.
Mate, for a Canadian to throwing so many bouquets at your local golf clubs, it's quite arresting.
Well, I think that maybe that's part of it, is the fact that at home we didn't have golf like this, and for the most part it's accessible. Okay, some of the tee times might be difficult to get, but if you're persistent and you go about it the right way, none of those golf courses are impossible to get on. So I think for me that's part of it. Is that they're accessible. It's great golf. It's basically in London, and it just gets overlooked. But maybe it's because I think that's part of it, is that I think if you've been born and raised here, you just take it for granted, even if you are an avid golfer, how good the golf is, until you find yourself in Saskatchewan and you're playing greens that don't have grass on them, and we oil them to keep the dust down, and you have to rake the greens after you're done putting. Well, then when you come to London and you play golf, you really appreciate what you've got, and that's perhaps what some of it is that I still don't take it for granted. I think it's a privilege to be here, to live here. I'm a British citizen, but it's still a privilege to be here and to have access to these things.
Brilliant. Maybe we can look at contemporary design for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Dye has often suggested the only way to build a golf course is to build it yourself. The statement I just read there would seem somewhat incongruous with some of the construction that has occurred over the last 60 years since Pete stopped selling insurance and devoted his time to designing golf courses. Pete Dye's legacy is still with us through his many courses, obviously. It's also arguable that just as importantly he may have spawned a neoclassical or second golden age movement within the realms of golf course architecture. You might tell me if you agree with this assertion, and perhaps expand upon Pete and Alice Dye's influence and contribution to the aforementioned return to more traditional strategies and the approach to course design and construction.
Yeah, so I think you're spot on. I don't think anyone fully understands yet how monumental Pete and Alice Dye's contribution to golf has been. And what I mean by that is in the mainstream. But I mean, you look You look at the individuals, the shapers that started with them, and then basically if you want to look at the golf course architecture tree from Pete and Alice Dye down to our day, everybody that is doing great work can be linked to them in one way or another, it would seem, worldwide anyways. I mean, there are exceptions to that here, where a lot of the big names that are practicing in the UK and Ireland are essentially extensions of those individuals that were doing the work generations ago. The one thing that has changed is that the design build, or the architect shape approach. And in a lot of ways, the UK has lagged behind what's been happening in America. So it's almost like we're in the 1980s, for example. And golf clubs are starting to get a bit more money. They're looking to invest. They're willing to make changes. They're willing to embrace. But the question is, are you going to invest in a 1990s style plan, or are you going to invest in what basically the leading golf course architects worldwide are doing now, design and build? And it's going to be interesting over the next few years to see whether, because we're lagging, do we need to go through what golf went through in the rest of the world in the 1990s and early 2000s? Or can we just skip from basically non-investment in a club to doing it right now? And hopefully that's what we'll see. The problem with basically bulldozing everything and putting in ponds and fountains and making everything green and filling everything up with white sand is the fact that once it's gone, it's gone. And I think if we think about golf courses in the same way that we would think about listed buildings, we have to have that bit of an approach. We have to have a respect for what's come before, and some of that does need to be preserved, especially the best examples of it. Not every golf course needs to be restored or renovated to its former glory, because if we're honest, it probably wasn't that good to begin with. And would it necessarily add anything to it today? Perhaps not. But when you think about these great golf courses, what a shame it would be, not just for us, but also for succeeding generations, if what made them so good and those tangible links to the past were lost. So the other thing that happens with a lot of modern golf course architects is that essentially golf clubs, committees, they go through this process, and in some instances, perhaps it's the right name, the right connections, the right relationships, or perhaps it's just the best salesmanship that wins the job. That's well and good if you're running a business. But if you're running a club and you want to preserve what makes your golf club and your golf course unique, hiring the best salesperson so that he can outsource the work to the lowest bidding contractor is probably not what's best for your golf course or your golf. And I'm not saying that all the work that's done that way is bad. It's not. But a lot of times you are at the mercy of supply and demand, in the sense that the shapers that will actually come in to build your golf course or design your green surrounds or design your new greens or whatever it might be, or try and restore what was there before. If the good ones are busy and you want to get your project done, you've got to accept whoever shows up with their bulldozer and their digger and their dumpers. And unfortunately, some of the work that's been done, even at some amazing, truly amazing golf courses, hasn't always been good. And unfortunately, there's some amazing stuff that's been lost. And I guess that's where, if a club was looking to do work, you would hope that they would be looking for someone that has reverential awe and respect for the golf course, for the original architect that did the work, that understood what made that architect tick, that understood his design portfolio and where their golf course fits within it, and trusted not just the architect that was selling them the shiny presentation, but they also knew the individuals that were going to show up with that digger on the back of their trailer to actually tear apart their golf course and make it better. And I don't think that is always what happens, even with some of the big names that we know. That's probably, I'm being very as diplomatic as I can be, but with basically just being truthful. And I think if you could get these guys to speak off the record, they would probably say exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your candidness and also your tippy toe through that particular mail. Perhaps I can maybe say a little bit more, and you don't have to say anything. I guess you're talking about the difference between good work and great work. You're perhaps talking about not just the right name, but the right result. And in many ways, as Bradley Klein would put it, you're talking about, sharpen up your bullshit detector in terms of the sales pitches. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, good shaping costs the same as bad shaping. And, Mackenzie talked about finality, and with many of these projects, oftentimes people have to go back to revise, and ultimately when things are perhaps built to plan and not found in the dirt in a sort of way where it fits the sense of place, if you like, that actually you will have to revise and revise and revise, because basically it not to say it wasn't fit for purpose in the first place, but it was built to plan and you got exactly what it said in the tin, as opposed to the best version of that particular bunker or drain or green or whatever it might be. And as you said also, you got to be conscious of what you might be losing in terms of the heritage of design, in terms of the historical importance of what was there, and perhaps who put that there.
And I'll give you one example. So recently, I had the opportunity to do a bit of work with two architect shapers at a project in North London. And what blew me away with the time that I was there was essentially the architect shaper would get in, do his work, go back to the fairway, stand at various distances, different aspects around the course. And he had historic photographs that he could look at all these different features from, different angles, different aspects, to see whether what he was building was actually working. And once it passed the eye test, everything was hand finished. So literally rakes and shovels. In this particular instance, we were building just the top edge of a bunker where the grass would come and come over it. So basically 3 layers or 4 layers of sod, and then the grass would come over top and then be pinned down. And basically finish that top edge in one of these little promontories that was coming into the bunker, and went back and he basically said, no, I'm not happy with it. I just don't like the way that looks. And it was probably about 8 inches of the lip of a bunker. And I stood back and I thought, oh, not admiring my own work, because I was just a monkey, basically. I was just doing what I was told. But essentially he said, I'm not happy with it, needs to change. So it all got torn out. So a bit of abortive work, and then it got redone. And the difference was amazing. And probably 95% of golfers would walk by that bunker and not be able to spot the difference, or even see what had been done. And even if you showed them before and after, probably couldn't pick up on it. But it's that level and attention to detail that I was blown away by. So the difference between a good shaper and an architect shaper is someone who has that passion to get it right, even if it takes until, it was in the middle of winter, 4 o'clock sun went down, and we were there till 6 o'clock working in the dark with lights. And then even just the foot of the bottom bit of the bunker. So instead of having just a shallow bit of the bunker that's just concave and that everything drains into it, there was pictures from various golf courses saying that the best bunkers that he'd seen were ones that had levels and steps to within the bunker. And again, I had never really picked up on that. But since then, I've looked at pictures of great bunkers, amazing hazards. And guess what? It's not just a uniform bowl on the bottom of the bunker. There's more going on. And it's that level of attention to detail that I walked away from that day of work just thinking to myself, like, that is actually what you're paying for. And when you get someone who's directly putting their name against the work that's being done, that's the attention and detail that you're going to get, because they can't hide behind a big name. Being a small operator and a small shaper, what they've got to do is really got to stand out, or else they won't get any more work. And so even sometimes going with the little guys, that's where you're going to get is that craft of building that you've seen, that kind of grace the big and the best projects, especially the ones that are being done stateside at the moment. That's the difference, and it is the difference. Is that thin end of the wedge that creates the difference between very good and great. But that's what we're aiming for.
I've certainly heard a similar story with regard to a bunker renovation in the States somewhere, which I think Bruce Hepner was involved in. And as you say, it was not happy with that, rub it out, not happy with that, rub it out. And until he was happy, he didn't move on. Like, it's a fixed price contract. Ultimately, he's not getting paid any more, but just the pride in the work and making sure that it is as good as it possibly can be. It just goes to show you how important who does the work, in addition to who creates the plan for the work, and actually the ability and the willingness to have that change in the ground to be the best version of itself.
Absolutely. Couldn't put it any better myself. That's exactly what it is. And it's just that craft movement. We've seen it with like microbreweries, with beer, with gin, with butchers, and with barbers. But we also see it in golf and golf courses. And actually, when you're spending that much money, with something as to you and I and the wider world of golf geeks, as important as a golf course, that's what we should be aiming for, especially on these courses that are worthy of and should demand that much care, attention, and respect. And hopefully we're getting to a point where we can match up those golf courses with the individuals that have that passion, that understanding, that reverence, and that respect for what they're working on.
Yeah, it's nice when a plan comes together. I think what we're talking really about there, Jasper, is legacy. Mm-hmm. and leaving a historical or a design legacy in the ground, not only from the club's perspective as custodians, but also from a designer's perspective in relation to a calling card. I recently read an article suggesting, in an Australian context, should I say, that the Sydney Opera House and Royal Melbourne Golf Club sit on a pedestal in terms of their overarching importance to design heritage in general in Australia. This statement interests me in terms of the contemporary importance and benefit that world-class golf courses foster from a cultural and societal perspective. Would you agree with the assertion of their importance?
Yeah, I think so. Again, this is with the backdrop of what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. So, I remember having these conversations with fellas during the pandemic, and if someone that you know and love has got COVID and died, or the horrors of war are on your doorstep, our golf courses,
first world problems, of course. Yeah,
absolutely. So with that backdrop, we have to make these comparisons and assertions. But it's true. Golf courses, they're tremendously important. And the history and legacy of these courses is important too. You think about architecture. So, for example, you talked about like the Sydney Opera House and Royal Melbourne. Architecture is a really interesting thing. And I think about golf course architecture in similar terms to building architecture, if you will. So not everything has to be the Sydney Opera House. There's traditional like butt and bend cottages up in Scotland, thatched roof cottages in England, Cotswold stone cottages, the Shard. And you could make this argument that there's equivalents for each of those things within the golfing world. And one isn't necessarily better than another. When it comes to taste, we might have a preference of one over the other, but examples of all should continue to exist. And I think that's part of the problem with golf course design and architecture, and hopefully we can avoid that, similar to what we've been saying in this country, is that not everything just turns into
blowout bunkers.
Exactly. So just blue tinted waters, fountains on 18, stripy fairways. There's a place for that, and if golfers like that, then they should be catered to. Fine, fair enough. That's not an issue at all. But if we got into a situation where everything was homogenous and everything just became that, then we would be in a worse place than we are now. So I think the ability to keep golf in variety, to cater to different tastes and preferences, and to test different types of players and allow golf to be enjoyed in different ways, that's important. And there's room for that. And it should be celebrated. And I think that's what makes golf so good. So, I mean, I love going to Muirfield. I don't know a better experience in golf than 36 holes at Muirfield on a members day. Absolutely amazing day of golf. The whole experience from beginning till end is world class. But as I said before, like Minchinhampton Old, I can really enjoy a golf course, sharing it with random ramblers, llamas, sheep, cattle, and horses. Or I could go to Musselburgh Old Links and have a round on 9 holes around the racetrack. And it's not to say that one's better than another. They're just different, but they can all be celebrated. They can all be fun, and they can all be enjoyed. And I think if we lose that, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying there. I guess we're talking about appreciation of the myriad of options that are out there, and perhaps an understanding that everything looking the same isn't quite what we want. I mean, in light of that, how do you think that golf history and the golf architecture landscape in terms of appreciation of both the history and the architecture has evolved in the UK and Ireland since your arrival on these shores, if at all?
Yeah, so I think in the last 10 years, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, when I first started, was there was definitely an ardent community of individuals here. And I think most of us probably know each other by our Twitter handles more than anything else.
Touche, yeah.
And to be quite honest, I think now there have been, events or opportunities where after COVID, we've been able to get together and actually put a name to a face and sit down and have a drink. And instead of doing it in 140 characters or less, we've been able to sit down for, put the world right in person. So I do think there is a rising tide of awareness when it comes to golf course architecture. And hopefully we're well positioned to lead that conversation, or at least provide a repository of information for people to access. So history isn't going anywhere. It's just a matter of not losing it, finding it, and putting it somewhere where it can be accessed. And hopefully that's where Value 18 will continue to thrive and grow. But when it comes to golf course architecture, you have a conversation now. And it's strange to me, because a lot of the conversation now that's happening in the mainstream about golf course architecture is down to the ball debate, which is actually because of equipment. And because of that, there's this conversation that's ongoing that's actually thrust golf course architecture, golf course design into the mainstream, because it's had to be discussed and spoken about. And I think even just using the term, like when Rory McIlroy spoke about golf course architecture, for the first time, basically saying, I didn't even know it existed. And I've just kind of like been introduced to it, and I've done a bit of reading about it. All of a sudden, it probably wasn't the first time he heard about it, just that he hadn't heard about it, but literally millions of golfers that were listening to him had heard about it. And you will find this. You'll find ardent golfers that have never really stopped to think, who made this golf course? Why did they make it this way? Why is there a bunker there? Why would it be better if it was there or somewhere else? So that conversation, I think, is starting to grow. There's people that have an awareness of it. And it's one of those things that once you get into it, it can deepen your appreciation of the game and help you to enjoy the game in a different way and at a different level.
I guess personally speaking, it's a greater understanding of it has actually probably changed the way that I view golf in its entirety. And to use an Adrian Logaism, eyes up as opposed to eyes down. So not that I don't care how I play anymore, but it's not quite as important to me than perhaps it once was. And maybe that's just me maturing. Maybe that's me opening my eyes a little bit more. And I suppose when I've travelled of late, I've not been so keen to whiz around the place and play as many golf courses as possible. But, I've sort of moved into focusing on multiple plays on fewer courses. I guess as a well-travelled golfer yourself, you might expand on whether quality or quantity is more important to you when organising trips these days.
Yeah, good question. So obviously if you're planning a trip, especially to a destination where you probably won't make it back again, you kind of want to hit the highlights. So from that perspective, quality is important. And I've gotten to the point where I'd rather play good golf less often than to play bad golf more often. I know that sounds terrible.
You're a golf snob, so am I, so that's all good.
Yeah, so I hate that expression, but
embrace it. Embrace it. It's just what people call you, and they call me that too, so I'm cool with it.
Yeah, and it's cool. So as golf snobs, I guess the idea is that being a golf snob doesn't necessarily mean that you're flush with cash or that you have to spend a fortune in order to play good golf. So I think that's sometimes where golf snobbery is sometimes misinterpreted. It doesn't always mean that you have to be playing 36 at Muirfield or, be at Trump Turnberry or, wherever else it might be.
It just means you'd rather not play shit golf.
Exactly. Yeah, as simple as that. And that's the point. And I'll give you an example. So I've got a little trip coming up where I'll be going to the west of Scotland, hopefully, in the next month or so. And that will be Shishkin, Kerridale, and Dunaverty. So 3 golf courses that most people would probably not go to because they didn't even know that they existed. If they did actually make it up there, they might go to Machrihanish. Probably wouldn't know about Macdunes.
Dave McClay Kid, yeah.
Just north of Machrihanish, yeah. And then you've got the Macri, which is over on Islay. And then, of course, everybody or most people now have heard of Ardfin. But the only reason they've heard of Ardfin is because it's epic and expensive and hard to get to. But all those courses in a trip
are in the back of beyond.
And that's the thing. But then you get out to the Outer Hebrides. So then you've got Barra, Askernesh. Most people have heard of Askernesh. And then you've got Harris. Again, three really good golf courses. So on one hand, you've got probably one of the most exclusive, elite, private, expensive, whatever you want to call it, golf courses in Ardfin. But then alongside that, with that trip, you can tack on Shishkin, Kerridale, Dunaverty, Barra, and Harris.
Needless to say, if Greg Coffey is listening, we'd love an invite.
Absolutely. So it's an amazing thing for me, and I think that's what I love about the UK is and Ireland is that you can go somewhere like Portrush, Rosapenna, but then you also have Critch Island.
What a place, yeah.
Like next door. So you've got these wonderful things on both ends of every conceivable spectrum, but the golf is still brilliant and genius. So when it comes to quality and quantity, if I'm going on a golfing vacation, obviously I want to play as much great golf as I possibly can. But to your point, if someone said pick your ultimate golf trip, I would say I'm going to show up in St. Andrews on Sunday, walk the old course in the morning, go and have lunch, walk the old course in the afternoon, go and have dinner, and then walk the old course in the evening, and then play 36 for the next 6 days. And that will be my week. So that would be my ultimate golf trip.
That sounds delightful.
That would never happen. So when you get golf that's that good, and architecturally on that level. And you could put, like you say, a handful of courses where you could do that on in the world. Royal Dornoch, Ballybunion. There's a handful of those courses where no matter how many times you play them, they just keep getting better and better and better, because those layers just keep getting taken off and you just get more and more intimately acquainted with it. Of course, if you could spend any amount of time, be a member for a week and just play unlimited amounts of golf, to me, that would be the ultimate. So yeah, quantity and quality usually go together, but I'd rather play one really good golf course on a vacation than to play 3 or 4 substandard ones. But also the other thing I was going to say was, oftentimes I've done a lot of research before I've gone. So perhaps when I go out the first time, I'm looking for more bits and pieces than trying to learn them just through experience. And I think that's also helped me to get more out of those one-off kind of rounds at these various clubs. I can kind of go and say, yeah, I didn't miss that because I knew about it before I went.
Yeah, I had a somewhat of a life-changing experience in Australia, as I mentioned before on the pod, so forgive me, listeners, with regard to Kingston Heath. I didn't get out to Royal Melbourne on that occasion, but I'm hopeful of doing that the next time. Kingston Heath, I only played once. I played badly, but I could actually see all of those nuances and layers there. It frightened the crap out of me, to be honest with you, just in terms of the strategic, I guess, what juxtaposing what one should do versus what one shouldn't do in terms of where you didn't want to be. And I guess it will be right up the top of the list when I do go back to Melbourne, because it's fascinating when you come across golf courses of that nature. And Portmarnock would class as a similar one. Portrush, obviously Royal County Down. We have any number of and St. Patrick's, which I played 4 times very luckily last year, and I'm going back in May up in Rossapena. But when you have those nuances that you can see, and with repeated play, that actually you start to learn where you should be, where you shouldn't be, and appreciate the time and the effort that has gone into the ground to do just enough to give you those scenarios and those visual deception pieces and whatever else. It's just a joy, rather than, obviously, and as you rightly pointed out, it takes all sorts. And if people like the Floridian look, that's cool too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why Peter Thompson called it fins on Cadillacs.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly right. So I think understanding golf and playing golf that keeps giving back. If I play golf course once and I think I have no need to ever come back here again because I've seen it all the first time around without knowing anything about it before I came, probably a good indication of where I would rank it on my scale. And it would be closer to the 1 than to the 10.
Uh-huh. In some ways, it's that Fazio effect, for want of a better word, that actually you get it all in one hit, and it's visually phenomenal in terms of just the aesthetic, what it looks like, the fountains, the white sand, the green grass. But that's it, potentially.
And that's it. And it's still enjoyable. I mean, I went out recently with a mate of mine who doesn't understand anything about golf course architecture. The concept of it doesn't even know it existed. I enjoyed my round. I enjoyed playing golf for the sake of playing golf. It was a day out with beautiful weather at a golf course that wasn't great from an architectural point of view. If I never go back, I won't be disappointed, and I don't think I'll miss anything. I still enjoyed my time with him because I was with a mate. We were outside, we were playing golf, and it was beautiful weather. What's not to love? But for me, golf has become more than that. It's become something that I can enjoy, not just playing and not just with friends, but also from an intellectual point of view. That there's meat on those bones that can be enjoyed, and in a different way than simply just playing the game, but also thinking the game.
Yeah, I can see we're 2 peas in the same pod, Jasper, which is great.
It'll be good when we get over to Ireland.
No, for sure. Hit me up. I would be insulted if you didn't. Come here, just in terms of just some advice to the listeners, perhaps, and and looking at the metrics. I know there are people far and wide in Australia and the United States and wherever else listening. So I'm very grateful for the reach that I appear to have. Assume for a moment that you're planning a trip for some of our listeners. The trip will consist of a 3-week stint anywhere in Europe. You can view it in its entirety, or as 3 1-week blocks? Where do you send them?
Right, so I actually thought a lot about this one.
Good. It was meant to make you think.
So I'm going to start off with one that is, I haven't done it yet. I've been dreaming about it for ages. And someday, hopefully, it'll happen. Someday soon.
I think I know where you're going to say, but go on anyway.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to Paris for at least a week.
I thought you were going to mention there, yeah.
So, and Paris obviously is one of those places that no one really thinks about as a golf destination. And when we talk about quality and quantity, well, hopefully we've got both. And I thought if we're going on a pure golfing vacation, we'll try and do 36 in a day, or at least 18 every day. So
busy boys.
Absolutely. And girls. So Morfontaine, I would think from my point of view, Morfontaine, both courses, and then you've got both Chantilly courses, Fontainebleau, Hardelot, Saint-Germain, the new course at Les Bordes, and Chiberta. So, okay, we have to head a little bit to the south coast after we get done with Paris, but I reckon it would be worth it. So what you're getting there is a heavy dose of original Tom Simpson. So a lot of Tom Simpson's work in the UK was done for very wealthy aristocratic families, and most of those courses don't exist anymore. Or they were renovations of existing courses, or basically making existing layouts better, which is great. But for original Tom Simpson, where you just gave him like virgin land and said, right, work your magic, France is probably the top of the list. So for me, Paris, if someone just said, right, we're leaving tomorrow, where do you want to go? We can open up all the doors. We can get you in on the inside. I think that would be more or less where I'd go. And the one exception to that would be the new course at Les Bordes, the Gil Hanse layout. So I think that one looks pretty amazing. I haven't played much or any of Gil Hanse's work, so I'd love to see that. And by all accounts, it's meant to be amazing. And I knew some of the individuals involved with the grow-in and then the management of it. So that's one that I would pick. So that's week one.
Okay.
We start in Paris.
Week two.
Where to? After that, we just basically hop over to London. Mm-hmm. So I thought we'd pack in more golf just because we're not heavy on the travel.
Okay.
So we're over to London. So Paris, London. And again, we're doing 36 a day. So it would be Swinley Forest, St. George's Hill, morning, afternoon. It is summertime, prime condition.
You wanna pack your blister packs?
Yeah, we're gonna need it. Yeah. So we're gonna do Swinley and St. George's Hill. So the two, I think, best, most original Harry Colt golf courses. So as far as peak Harry Colt pre-World War I, 1910, 1911, 1912, I think Colt at the height of his powers on some of the most amazing golfing ground, that's those two courses, has to be. Then, of course, you've got the two courses at Sunningdale, where you get a little bit of Willie Park Jr., Harry Colt, obviously, and Tom Simpson. I love West Sussex, absolutely love West Sussex. So I would say 36 there. And then you get exposure to the three majors. So you've got Hodgkin, Guy Campbell, and Hutchinson. So the three majors. And we're confident that Simpson did work at West Sussex too, but we don't know exactly what he did or how much. But between Hilliard, the three majors, and Simpson, you've got an outstanding layout. That 36 there in a day is spectacular golf. Again, back up to London for Walton Heath, 36, old and new. I think the old Walton Heath is spectacular. It's got just that essence of the old course, but inland, where you play it, and the more you play it, the better it gets. So it might be lost on you the first time you play it, but you'll be able to play it again and again in your mind, and you'll start to understand it as you do. I'd have to go back to Woking in New Zealand. I think they're two amazing golf courses. and especially if you're an overseas visitor, perhaps from Canada or the States, it's the type of golf that you won't see at home. So around 6,000 yards, heathland golf, just intimate, just top English heathland golf. And there's just something about those two courses that's just special. You can't really put your finger on it, but you just have to experience it to understand it. And then lastly, it would be Worplaston and the Addington, just for that Abercrombie. So you kind of get in one little trip Fowler, Simpson, Colt, Park, Abercrombie, and Croom. So you kind of get in London, within that little radius, exposure to the best of like these golf course architects that they ever did at the height of their powers. And that's what makes London golf so special, is that there's just such good golf from a variety of architects packed into like literally a few square miles. And then lastly, if you've never been, you have to go to Scotland. I struggled with this, and the only reason I struggled with it was just because if it's only a week, Ireland's too good to fit into a week. You need to spend 3 weeks in Ireland.
Good answer.
So you need to get Dublin, Newcastle, Portrush, Rosapenna, Bally, then all the way down the west coast. You basically start in Dublin, go north, and do what would be the north, east, north, northwest, west, and then southwest of Ireland. And you try and get as many great golf courses as you can in one go.
It's a lot of driving along the wide Atlantic way there.
Well worth it, yeah. Some of the three best weeks of your life. But anyways, the trip that if we only have a week, just due to the geographic location, was Scotland. So if we're landing in Edinburgh, we start off with Bruntsfield in Edinburgh, which you need a putter and a 7-iron to play, just for chipping and pitching. And that's kind of the birthplace of golf in Edinburgh and East Lothian. It's free to play. You walk out there and you're probably going to be chipping around people having picnics and walking their dogs.
Say that again. It's free to play.
Free to play. So they got a 36-hole short course. You can literally walk up. There might be an honesty box that needs a few quid. I can't quite remember. If there was, I put it in. Don't come chasing
No,
me.
for sure.
So yeah, but the reason for it is just because it's part of the homage to the roots of the game, and I think that's something you can't buy history, and I think anyone that goes to Edinburgh, although it's not exciting or it's just part of the first trip, you should hit Bruntsfield. And then followed up very quickly by Musselburgh Old, just the site of some of the early opens. And then, because those are two really quirky courses, we'd finish the day in North Berwick. And North Berwick is probably one of my favorite golf courses. It's so bold and so quirky, and it absolutely breaks every rule that you think a golf course should be. And then your prime location for 36 holes at Muirfield, playing foursomes on a members only day. If you could swing that would be quite an experience. So 36 at Muirfield is to me the best experience I've had in golf yet. Hopefully we'll be able to challenge that in the future. Then what I would do is go up to, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, especially if some of my mates listen to the podcast, but I would actually go to Gleneagles Kings and Queens.
What? No,
I know.
No. At least you didn't say the centenary course or the Nicholas course, which I think is one and the same thing.
So the reason why I thought that this would be great, especially if you had someone coming over from North America to the UK and they only had a week in Scotland, was just to show them the caliber of golf that's capable of being played in Scotland, whether it's on the coast as links or inland. Mm-hmm. Gleneagles Kings, for me, it's the course that changed my mind about James Braid.
Okay.
So it's, I think the Kings is absolutely genius. What I love about it is got a character all its own. You could drop yourself on that golf course anywhere on the golf course, you could see one bunker and you would say, this is Gleneagles Kings. So, and I think that's a rare thing for a lot of golf courses, because again, we've gotten a bit homogenous. Everything's starting to look the same, but there it's unique. There's got some individual character. So just to show that Scotland is not a one-trick pony, I'd be going to Gleneagles Kings and Queens. I would end up in Kingsbarns on a Sunday. And the reason for that is that I would play 18 and then leave the afternoon to go and walk the old course while no one's on it on the Sunday. So essentially it's 36, but Kingsbarns and then the old course. And that way you've got one of the best modern links golf courses that's been built alongside the old course. 36 on the old course, obviously, have to do that. Then I would jump up to Carnoustie, and I think Carnoustie is spectacular. And again, the reason why I chose Carnoustie was because it's a different type of links that you would find. Then it's completely different to Kingsbarns, completely different to the old course. So it's a different type of links that you would find. Again, completely different to North Berwick. There's some similarities to Muirfield in the sense it's a bit inland, but it's its own type of links. So that's why I'd go there. And then I'd finish up with Cruden Bay. And again, I have to go back to Tom Simpson. The run of holes between 4 and 7 at Cruden Bay, you could do that loop endlessly and never get sick of it. If you had those holes, you could literally play those holes over and over and over again. And that's not even to mention the holes that you have basically on the far end of the property as you go out and then come back in. So that would be my trip. And if you had a little bit of time after Cruden Bay, then I would tack on the front 9 at Royal Aberdeen, because you'd have to. It's phenomenal. Spectacular. Yeah. So that would be my trip. And the reason for it is not that there's not other great golf courses. There is, but it would just give you a flavor of the quality of golf in a variety of different types in one little trip. So 3 weeks, London, Paris, and Edinburgh, Scotland, basically. And you would be that one trip, you could never come back to Europe again, and you would still say that you've seen the best, played the best, and you would have to make it to Ireland once for 3 weeks. But other than that, you could die a happy golfer.
It's just as well you know nothing about golf courses.
Well, I mean, yeah, and then you get Australia and New Zealand, and the list goes on. And I guess that's the beautiful thing about this game.
Of course it does. Of course,
there's probably a lifetime that you could spend and more finding these golf courses and enjoying them. But that would be my pick.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on that on behalf of the listeners. I'd like to just take a look at your historical consulting for golf clubs for a second. Mm-hmm. Obviously, from a historical perspective, club fires have been a blight on the golfing world. Most recently, actually, both Oakland Hills in Michigan and Beaverbrook in Surrey have experienced significant fire-related damage. This tale is a common one amongst Irish and UK clubs as well. In addition to obviously hiring Jasper Miners at a value 18, what advice would you offer to clubs that lost everything at some point over time as a consequence of a fire, or perhaps were not as assiduous in their custodianship of documentation as they might have been?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I think I've said it a few times, is you can't buy heritage and you can't buy history. You've either got it or you don't. And the problem with a lot of clubs is that perhaps they don't have any golf history or golf architects or geeks that have a passion for this type of thing. So unfortunately, if they have things, they're probably hidden in plain sight, or someone's been through them but not necessarily picked up on the nuances. And if they're not careful, it can be lost. So it's not just fires. I mean, there's a lot of times that like ink on parchment or paper is just lost over time. So it's a race against time at the moment. And unfortunately, what are we? Probably 100, 120, 130 years for some golf courses. And we're in danger of losing all of that. And I think only with the passage of more time will we understand how important or how early on we are in golf, relatively speaking. So although it's an ancient game, more or less from the early 1900s until now, we've kind of been taking this seriously. So I would recommend, if it was possible and you had the members that were willing to do it, to digitize as much as you could, whether that was photos, postcards. The digital archives online are good. But if you do have any physical copies, you need to get those digitized to a high standard. So things like the British newspaper archive are great, but a lot of the scans that are done are not great. So any type of pictures or even some of the text is illegible. So if you have any of that, just getting them and digitizing them and keeping them is great, and it should be done.
And obviously backing that information up to a backup device as well, and actually have double and triple backup, because things can go Pete Tong.
Absolutely. So it's a matter, I guess, of first, it's not necessarily that there's not members who aren't willing to do that. It's, I think, having the individual to say that actually is worth having. So there's been multiple times where I've gone into clubs. I think of a project that we've done recently. There was 2 centenary books written. So one at the 100-year mark and then one at the 125-year mark. And when originally I asked, what is there in the minute books? This club was fortunate. They had all the original minute books from the beginning till now. And they said, there's nothing in there about the golf course. But the individual who went through those minute books to write the centenary book was looking for basically anecdotes and stories of prominent members. And they weren't even looking for information about the golf course. And what we're able to do is basically take a lot of those photos, maps, drawings, sketchings, newspaper articles, various magazines that were published, and start to piece together, and along with a lot of this information, the story and history of the golf course, which is at the end of the day the golf club's most valuable asset. And it is a labor of love. You have to be interested in it when you're literally turning thousands of pages and trying to decipher someone's handwriting from 100 years ago. It's a labor of love to do it, but with a lot of the courses that I've done research for, it's worth it, because it's just helping to preserve the legacy and what's so important, and that's the work of the work that's been done on the golf course itself.
In terms of the evaluating website, which I must say is a phenomenal resource, so well done, and it looks great also. Some of the items you have for sale on the website are astonishing, and I don't as you get to know me, you'll understand I don't throw bouquets around too much. I mean, Joe McDonald's water maps and sunrise prints are just extraordinary. I mean, the reprints of the Harry Roundtree stuff from Bernard Darwin's book, not to mention the exceptional photography from Adam Toth and Kevin Murray. First of all, I'm interested to know if there's any new collections coming out, because there appears to be just a conveyor belt of stuff. And ultimately, with regard to the water maps, if a club wanted one done, how should they best go about commencing that process?
Yeah, so just a little bit of a backstory. Basically, I'd been doing a lot of research on the old course, and I had bought every conceivable book about the old course I could possibly find. And again, going back to Tom Doak, he wrote that when he was at the old course, one of the tests to become a caddy was you had to name every landmark on the old course. So I thought, well, there's got to be a map of it then. And I couldn't find it. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll just have to make my own. And that's where I did a lot of research. And Scott McPherson also peer reviewed it. So he's helped out a lot. And obviously he penned the book, the evolution of the old course. So it helped quite a lot. But basically we were able to create this map that's now since been endorsed by the St. Andrews Links Trust. So that's kind of where it all started with the artwork. But of course I had like a printout from Google Earth with a bunch of like call outs and, pen on paper, literally, and highlighters. And I sent it over to Joe after I seen some of the amazing stuff he'd been doing on social media. And he very kindly basically decided to collaborate with me. And Joe's a wonderful person. He's just a top bloke, and a friend now, I can say, which is nice. And that's probably more important than any artwork that we've done. But with the research coupled with Joe's genius and his skill and talent, it's created something really special. It's been really good. So to answer your question about the new artwork that's coming out, we've got quite a lot of stuff that we've been saving up for the 150th. So there will be some very interesting artwork coming out with regards to the old course. So we're looking forward to releasing stuff as we come up to the open, which will be very, very nice. So the sunrise is a taster of what's to come, but we've basically got what we need in order to really do well. Joe does, anyways. So that's quite good. And if there are clubs out there that are interested in doing something similar, then they can just get in touch. Just fire us off an email. So you'll find it, or a contact form on the website. Just send me a little note, and we can get everybody going. So the process overall is basically a drone scan that's done by a gentleman by the name of Sam Cooper.
Never heard of him either.
Never heard of him either. No, he's flies under the radar. This Sam. And then once he's done his magic, then Joe takes that and basically does what Joe does best: is create stuff that no one else can. And then the last leg of it is that we kind of roll it out, and everybody does their bit, and we come up with some pretty amazing stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes and how it continues. But that's the long and short of it at the moment. Basically, with regards to the artwork. So we're looking forward to a big summer, and hopefully we've got some really exciting stuff for the old course coming up.
Fantastic. Again, I think we've probably done golf courses to death, but we're gonna go again. Okay, so all of our guests, I don't want to make you feel left out. So it would be remiss of me not to ask this question, even though I've really probably asked the question in a roundabout fashion already. All of our, I know you've played a lot of golf in the UK and Ireland, and as someone who likes to prepare himself for golfing adventures, I'm very interested to hear where your top 5 courses that you haven't played perhaps on your bucket list are, and why they are on your bucket list in the first place.
Okay, so I thought, just because I've left Ireland out until now, this is where...
This is a really good answer. It started so well.
So I'm very much looking forward to heading over to Rosapenna. So that's arranged. Hopefully this summer, when the days get long enough that I can have multiple rounds, we'll be over in Rosapenna to see St. Patrick's. So for all intents and purposes, that's one on the bucket list for me. Not at least that I know Clyde Johnson and Angela Mosier, so to be able to see their work firsthand, and to have the inside story, I guess, on the course and how it was constructed, and then to be able to see it of a proper geek out when we head over.
You want to make sure that Frank Casey Jr. joins you, because he can tell you exactly who did what. Himself and his brother John were apparently on the site 3 or 4 times a day. So they may well have done a bit of shaping themselves. I'm not 100% sure, but Frank has kindly agreed to join myself and a mate of mine in May. So I'll get the lowdown as to exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's we're looking forward to that. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to make that happen. So that's in the works at the moment, and there's some preliminary discussions going on, and a very kind invitation that's been extended. So that is probably the number one. And the reason why I picked that one for Ireland is just that it's a modern links. And I think for me that's an interesting, when I go on a holiday, I want to kind of see a variety of things. So that probably came through with regards to the trip in Scotland. But I think in Ireland, that would be number one. So Rosapenna St. Patrick's, just to see a modern, great golf course. Second, I've been wanting to get to Cairn for an age, and I haven't been. And then I think with the new Dunes course, meant to be spectacular. And again, going back to Joe, it's one of his favorite golf courses. And every time I speak to him, he always tells me about Cairn. So that's kind of brought it up in my expectations, because Joe is a man of good taste. And if he says a golf course is good, being a Hoylake member himself, then it must be. So Cairn is up there.
For sure. Ali McIntosh and Tom Coyne will be very pleased for you to hear you say that.
So really looking forward to that one. So that hopefully will come off in June, May or June perhaps. Obviously Ballybunion, just again the Tom Simpson connection. That's one where I haven't been, but if you're going to look at Tom Simpson and his contribution to links, Muirfield's a bit of an interesting one with Tom Simpson because it doesn't necessarily hold to the strategic minimalism that Tom Simpson was known for. So his work at Muirfield is slightly different than his work elsewhere. But Ballybunion is one that is right at the top for that reason as well. And then, of course, you've got Royal County Down, just because of old Tom Morris and the inherent blindness. And it's one of golf's great links, and I've not had the privilege to play yet. So that would have to be on the list. And then another one that hopefully will be ticking off that's been organized is to Royal Portrush. So, and the reason for that is that it's one of the last open road courses I need to get to. So I don't normally put golf courses on my to-do list because they've hosted a tournament. But the one exception I do make is for the Open because it's the best, and that selection of courses is top notch. So that's why I would have to include Royal Portrush. So we've got St. Patrick's, Carn, Ballybunion, Royal County Down, and Royal Portrush. So hopefully this year in June, if we can make that happen, then that would be good. And then of course, it was so difficult because you've got the island, you've got Portmarnock, you've got, you could just go on and on and on. Lucky man to be living in Ireland.
You won't be disappointed. But as you said earlier on, we tend to take for granted what we have on our doorstep.
Absolutely.
But the wonderful thing is that St. Patrick's adds to the whole quality of golf that's available. And as my colleague Ali McIntosh said last week, it's just wonderful that there's another course of that quality in St. Patrick's that we add to the list of people like yourself coming over. So the more the merrier.
Absolutely.
And play early and often would be my recommendation.
Sounds good. I can't wait.
Listen, just one final question, Jasper.
Mm-hmm.
You have obviously an extensive golf-related library that frankly puts my 60 or 70 golf books to shame. You might be kind enough to recommend 2 golf books to our listeners that might provide some entertainment, enlightenment, or anything else.
Right. So again, just going down the golf course architecture route, perhaps not the first books to read if you haven't read anything about golf course architecture. There's probably easier first steps or gateway books, if you want to call them that, to golf course architecture. But the first few chapters of Tom Simpson's architectural side of golf, again, it gives you the strategy in a nutshell of what he was trying to do, and I think better than anyone else explains what strategic golf actually is and how it can be accomplished through design. So the second half of the book is a bit odd, if I'm honest. Probably best read with a bottle of wine and probably some Armagnac by a fire.
He was a bit odd by all accounts, though, the same, wasn't he? I mean, he used to wear a beret and a cape and didn't take any payments, and they used to think that Molly Gourlay was his wife.
Exactly. So, yeah, it does get a bit odd as you get near the end of the book. It's a bit philosophical and who knows, whatever else. But if you don't want to go down that rabbit warren, then that's fine. The first half of the book, you don't have to read the whole thing. The first few chapters is more than enough to get your head wrapped around what strategic golf course design is, what minimalism is, and basically from the mind of the best practitioner of it. So Tom Simpson's architectural side of golf. And then to stay with golf course architecture, I think the book that I like the most, as in the practical way to build a golf course according to those principles, is George C. Thomas's Golf Course Architecture in America. And it's just it's a big book There's lots of text. There's also lots of pictures and diagrams and green sketches and examples and photographs. And between the two, you would have like the philosophical kind of design hallmarks, ethos, way of thinking from Tom Simpson. And then on the other hand, you would have, here it is in practice, in the ground, George C. Thomas, Golf Course Architecture in America. So between those two, if those were the only two books that you ever read about golf course architecture, you would have a good understanding of what it is, what makes it good, and be able to evaluate your own golf course and the other ones that you play.
Excellent. Well, Jasper, it's been a great pleasure to speak with you on the pod. I'd like to wish you continued success with evalu18.com. Actually, before we go, you might tell people how they can get a hold of you if they so wish.
Sure. So the website is evalu18.com. So EVALU18.com. So we evaluate golf courses from a historical and architectural perspective, hence evalu18.com. There's a form that you can fill out that will get pings directly to me. You can also email me at jasper@evalu18.com and I'll follow up straight away. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. Or you can just DM me, give me a follow on social media. Twitter's usually best. And then just give me a DM and we'll continue the conversation there.
Perfect. Well, as I said, continued success with evalu18.com and indeed the Harry Cole project and whatever other aliases you have on Twitter, because I think there's a few more. And the next time you find yourself in Dublin, obviously it will be my great pleasure to host you at my home club at Royal Dublin. So in the meantime, go easy and happy golfing.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Shane.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. Many thanks for joining us today. And thank you to Jasper Miners for his time. As always, you can find us online at firmandfast.golf and on Twitter at firmandfastgolf. Until the next time, happy golfing.